What is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for tuning into Inside the Panthers on YouTube. My name is Steven Thompson, coming at you with another Inside Pitt practice report. Before we dive right into things, it's a busy week in Pitt athletics, but wanted to let you know it's a bit of a modified schedule this week with these practice reports and the post game reports. Got some travel arrangements I got to make. I'm going home for the holiday, and then we got some games. We got tons of games this week to work around as well. So, we got this episode for you today covering both a little bit of football and a little bit of basketball. The big hitters from today is we got to talk to both teams. We'll have more reporting off this week of football media availabilities on InsideThePanthers.com. And then, we'll be back Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday with both some football and basketball content on our YouTube channel right here. We'll recap the basketball games on Wednesday and Friday, and then preview the football game against Duke with a video on Friday, and then recap the game on Saturday as well. So hope you'll stay tuned with us through the end of this week. Like I said, it's a big week in Panther athletics, and I hope you'll stay with us as we try to deliver you some great coverage of both football and men's basketball. So speaking of which, we'll start with the big news of the day, and that came from the football side of things. We got to talk to Pat Narduzzi today, our last, I guess, actually our last press conference of the year with the head coach of the Panthers. We had it at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex, final week of the year. They're wrapping things up, but Narduzzi had some unfortunate news to share. So a couple guys had to end their seasons early. That's tight end Gavin Bartholomew and defensive tackle Devin Danielson. They'll both miss the remainder of the season with injuries, undisclosed. But for Bartholomew, you could see him walking around in a boot prior to the Boston College game. He was on crutches after getting hurt against Syracuse, and so you can kind of, extrapolate from there. Not really sure what Danielson's injury is, but, we know obviously that it'll keep him out of this final week of the season. It's just one game, but still a couple big blows for the Panthers on either side of the ball as they try to pick up one more win against Duke and close the year out strong. Danielson was a veteran on the defensive line, and there wasn't much of that to go around. So now they're much thinner at that spot. And it's also just a sad way for a guy like Danielson's career to end. He's exhausted his eligibility, won't be able to come back to Pitt next year, but still leaves Pitt with 9.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, and an ACC championship underneath his belt. So not the worst legacy you could possibly leave as a college player. Wish the best for Devin moving forward, but he won't be in the picture as the Panthers travel to Durham this weekend to take on Duke and the Blue Devils. Bartholomew, a very, very big loss as well. He was probably the best big play threat on this team and one of the better ones in college football, averaging north of 18 yards per catch. Nate Yarnell was able to get by without him against the Eagles, but the regular season finale against Duke, that will be an even bigger task, and Bartholomew's absence will loom a lot larger as the Panthers take on one of the better pass defenses in the ACC and probably even the country. This is a really good unit. They're well coached, and the Panthers really will have their hands full, especially without one of their big play threats in the mix. Obviously people are disappointed with how Bartholomew was used this year, but when he got the ball in his hands, he was pretty electric, and they'll miss his presence and they'll miss his gravity against the Blue Devils. And along the defensive line, the guys who will step in are pretty obvious. I mean, got Tyler Bentley and David Green, a couple of sixth-year seniors, some older guys to give you some experience there. And then, Sean Fitzsimmons and even Elliott Donald got in a bunch against Boston College. You can expect those guys to take some more snaps as well. But, two big losses for the Panthers. Danielson, like I said, won't be able to come back. We'll see what Bartholomew decides to do in the offseason. Haven't heard any, rumors about him about him thinking about transferring or not, but you have to assume in this day and age that when you have good players, there are other schools looking to add them to their rosters. So we'll see how the offseason unfolds and, hopefully see Bartholomew back in blue and gold next year. Elsewhere, Nate Yarnell elevated to QB1 on the depth chart. Not really a surprise, just confirmation of something that we saw last week and something that Pat Narduzzi hinted to in his press conference following the Boston College win. Narduzzi raved about Yarnell's intelligence, and if I can read in between the lines a little bit, seemed to even suggest that the Panthers, missed on Yarnell, as much as they could, given that he is the starter now, and because he was on the roster before, but kind of buried as the third string guy. The Panthers did not get everything that they could have out of Yarnell this year, and Narduzzi suggested that maybe The coaching staff was looking for the most talented guy in their quarterback evaluations, and that led them to maybe miss on that intelligence that Narduzzi referenced and the football smarts that he really likes about Nate Yarnell, and the cerebral characteristics that he has. And while they may be looking at Phil or Christian, not that those guys are dumb by any means, or that they don't have the smarts to play Division I quarterback, but those guys probably have the better arm, the better arm talent. Those guys had the more highly rated pedigrees than Yarnell coming in, and Narduzzi's just glad that he finally feels like he has one of the right guy in this spot right now. He loves Nate Yarnell. We've heard about Yarnell going back to last season as someone that the Panthers have a lot of faith in. And while he was kind of buried on the depth chart behind some more experienced guys, he has certainly earned the right to start another game against Duke and maybe get a jump on that 2024 competition with. You have to assume Christian Bayer is going to be involved in that as well. But Narduzzi hit on the idea that Yarnell's got to be consistent this week. He did everything real well against Boston College. He was accurate. He took care of the ball. He was able to stretch the field a little bit while also making good decisions. So that certainly gets harder when teams have real film on you. And, like I said, going down to face a Blue Devil defense that plays really well against the pass, got some talent in that secondary, and also really well coached. But this is also different from Yarnell's last start. Against Western Michigan, he didn't have to do a whole lot. Wasn't a ton of film on him and what he can do, but he really had to take the reins and show what he can do as a player. And now there's stuff on film of him. And now teams are going to be able to game plan a little bit better for him. They know he's coming, and they'll be really able to test him. So it'll be interesting to see what Yarnell's able to do in start number 2 of his, start number 2 of this season, start number 3 of his career. There was a little bit more note from head coach Pat Narduzzi's Monday press conference about how he's approaching the offseason and even maybe a solution to the sign stealing that you've seen become a hot button issue in college football these days. But I'll be writing more about that for InsideThePanthers.com. Encourage you to stay tuned on the website for that, where we'll cover some of those topics. But shifting gears a little bit, I wanted to talk about a big week ahead for the basketball team, for the men's basketball team. Won't talk to you all before the Panthers hit the floor, at least about basketball, before the Panthers hit the floor at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn for the NIT preseason tip-off this week. So let's go ahead and preview that event now. Pitt gets 2 games. The first, a guaranteed game against Florida, and the second, they'll play one of either Baylor or Oregon State. We'll deal with the known commodity first, and that's Florida. They've already beaten an ACC team this year. They knocked off Florida State, rolled them, quite honestly, by 21 points, and then a narrow loss to Virginia by 3 points on a neutral court. This is a talented team, got tons of size and length. That's what I think sticks out the most when you look at their roster. I think they have multiple 7-footers, some 6'10", some 6'11" as well. They're number 1 in offensive rebounding rate. They're 54th in block rate. They shoot with great efficiency from inside the arc. They don't take a ton of threes, which is reflective of their size as well. 25th overall in offense and 59th in defense per KenPom. It's obvious Pitt's going to get really tested on the inside against the team that can really match them in size. I mean, the Panthers, I think, were number 2 in KenPom's average height metric, which, doesn't just take the average height of your roster, but factors in, minutes played by certain guys and their heights as well. And Florida's number 12, Pitt's number 2. I think, I haven't checked that number, but I believe Pitt is within the top 10, if not the top 5. And that means that the Panthers are really getting tested against a team with Power 5 size, not just Power 5's talent. And, the Panthers have used their size to really dominate, especially on the defensive end through these first 4 games against teams that had some strength, had some beef to them, but, no one's been able to match their length, and maybe no one will, but, Florida will come as close to being able to do that as any team has this season, and maybe any team down the stretch of this season. So to that end, I think the Twins, Jorge and Guillermo Diaz-Graham, are going to be a bit of an X factor here. They're going to have to be huge, both holding their own defensively against these bigs, but then also using their skills, which make them unique on the offensive end, to stretch the floor, create spacing for the guards and the wings and themselves. And that's even before we address the idea of some potential foul trouble for Federico, which could pop up, seeing as Florida shoots the 8th most free throws in Division I. So, a great test for the Panthers right off the bat. They're hoping to get a win, obviously, but I think also just kind of to give themselves a measuring stick. which kind of leads me into my next topic. If the Panthers will move on, they'll get one more game, like I said, against Baylor and or Oregon State, or I guess not even and or just or Baylor or Oregon State. The Beavers are in a rough spot. They're 186th in KenPom, 199th in offense, 176th in defense. Their defensive metrics look pretty good, and they've got some size on the inside that helps them out, but they're still super young and team that's rebuilding a little bit, and someone that I think Pitt, quite honestly, I mean, I know Pitt hasn't played a Power 5 opponent yet, a high major opponent yet, but this seems like the kind of team that Pitt should be able to run past pretty easily. Baylor, on the other hand, I think would be an incredible test for this group. A great basketball game as well. Baylor's a top 20 team if you pay attention to the polls, or they're also a top 10 team if you look at efficiency ratings on KenPom. They're extremely balanced, and Scott Drew is one of the best coaches in American college basketball. The Bears have championship pedigree, and this is just not the type of opportunity you get to play a team with this kind of pedigree, like I said, and with this level of, it's not really tradition, but history of recent success, and a team that is going to compete for a national championship this year. So this is going to be a great measuring stick, and selfishly, I'm really interested to see a potential matchup between Jacoby Walter and Bub Carrington, two of the best freshmen in the point guard in the country, matched up at that point guard spot. So I mean, given that Baylor gets Oregon State in that first round, we've talked about, kind of the differences between those two teams. I'd have to assume that Baylor's going to win that game, move on to the championship of the NIT preseason tip-off. So Pitt will likely need to beat Florida to get a shot at the Bears, but certainly possible. And either way, the Panthers will get a good test in Florida right off the bat. So lots to look forward to this week as the Panthers wrap up football season and men's basketball season begins to really heat up. So I hope you'll stick with me and Inside the Panthers throughout your holiday weekend as we deliver you tons of great Pitt content. But with that, I'm headed out of here. Thanks so much for tuning in to another Inside Pitt Practice Report. My name is Stephen Thompson. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to us on YouTube. That's youtube.com/@InsideThePanthers, and find all of our reporting from Pitt practices and games at InsideThePanthers.com. Hope you all enjoy their week, and until next time.